everyone, I'm Mitali Gupta, and thank you everyone for coming today online and in person as well. Thank you so much, Jeremy and Kate, for the introduction. As a part of my completion seminar today, I'm going to talk on sensory evaluation and textual evaluation of yogurt products. As we all know, the world population is going to increase by almost 2 billion in the next decade, and the protein demand is also going to grow by almost 20% by 2030. And one of the major products, that's the plant-based yogurt substitutes, has shown quite a lot of interest in the recent times due to the growing lactose intolerance, veganism, and also to feed the growing populations. But however, these plant-based yogurts have shown a low popularity and a low market share. And these are not very well liked by the consumers. That's why there is a concern about how to improve their popularity and make this more successful. As a part of my PhD project, the main research question, I don't know why this is interrupting this panel. We can't see. Yeah, at the top. I don't know how to let this go. Sorry about this. I'm just trying to hide this panel.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll just bring it, Tali.
Okay. So as a part of my PhD project, the main objective was to understand how to enhance the consumer acceptability of these alternatives. The main reasons for the acceptance include the functional attributes, which includes the texture, structure, and composition, the liking and the emotions, which include the liking, self-reported emotions, and the intrinsic emotions, and the perceptual attributes, which include the cognitive, affective, and social responses, and also the cultural norms, which can be different cultural cultures like the Asian Westerns. And also another aspect that is not being covered as a part of this project is health benefits that also affect the acceptance. It's a combination of all these factors which affect the acceptance and not just one of these. The major research objectives of the project were to understand relationships between the sensory liking and textual attributes of yogurt products, to understand the effect of emotional and physiological responses on physicochemical attributes of yogurt products, to understand the impact of culture on liking and emotions, to evaluate consumers' perceptual responses which affect the liking and popularity, and finally to develop plant-based yogurt alternatives using microalgae and soy combinations. As a project overview, it can be seen here. Firstly, the focus group studies were carried out to understand the affective, cognitive, and the social responses of consumers, and also to shortlist the yogurt products for further testing. Then the blind tasting experiment was carried out to compare the dairy with the plant-based yogurt alternative. And also the texture and rheology was measured, and also the structure to understand the interactions with sensory, and also to establish the drivers of liking and acceptability. Next, an online survey was carried out for the perceptual attributes, and finally, novel yogurt alternatives were created using microalgae as a base and high-pressure homogenization as a structuring technique.
Tali, you hit escape and get it out of full screen and get rid of that.
Is it better? Because I'm not able to hide the
I think Zoom is in full screen.
Okay.
We can't.
Yeah, it'll just make it difficult for her to present because she can't see.
Yeah, because I can't see the
slides.
titles.
So Zoom, I think, is in full screen.
Sorry for the interruption.
If you hover over the Zoom and you close that meeting control setting, and hover over, and then bottom, then there'll be that little X.
There's something with the system which generally doesn't happen.
Yeah, hit escape again because it seems like Zoom is in full screen mode.
Okay.
So just hit escape again.
It's not doing anything.
Or stop share.
Okay.
And then just make sure it's not in, so hit the little thing that Zoom is not in full screen.
Okay.
So that, yep, and now go back to PowerPoint, or we'll go back to share screen again now.
Oops, sorry.
That won't be for people online. Go share screen. And now hit, it's back again.
It's
Are you okay to continue?
yeah, I'm okay. That's it.
The panel can be moved to the bottom. Yeah. If your slides are just hover over it and drag it down. No, you can drag it down.
Can you drag it off to the side? Yeah, or drag it, yeah, drag it to the bottom at least.
So you can at least see the.
Yeah, try putting full screen down. Full
It
screen.
has hidden this.
Now just drag it down, or see if you can.
Yeah, let me pick up the point. Where's the? Can't see the bottom now.
Can you drag it to the side?
That's on.
That's much better. Yeah, that's not better.
Sorry about this. I think I'll keep on moving it up and down
Yeah.
as per convenience. So the first objective of this research was to understand the interaction of texture with sensory attributes for the yogurt products. A bit about the background of the study. We already know that texture, structure, and composition plays an important role in the sensory acceptance of food products. And these plant-based yogurts have a different protein type and hence a different relation properties as compared to the dairy yogurts. That's why it's important to understand how the texture, structure are related to the sensory attributes. As a part of this research, these are the test yogurts that were taken, which were 4 dairy yogurts and the 2 plant-based yogurts. A focus group study was carried out with a set of like 28 total yogurts, out of which 6 were, which are mentioned here, were selected for the final tasting. It's mentioned here. The reference was a plain dairy yogurt. The soy and coconut were also plain plant-based yogurts. The berry was sweet. The berry cookies and drinkable were the sweetened yogurts with added berries, crunchies, and drinkable format, which is more liked by the Asian consumers. In the sensory liking, overall liking, emotions, and textural terms were analyzed. In the textual analysis, rheology, flow behavior, and microstructure analysis was carried out, and finally, textural factors were linked with the sensory attributes of liking. We can see here overall liking scores for all of the yogurt products. Reference and soy were similarly liked by the consumers, and coconut was less liked, whereas cookies was the most liked yogurt and the berry was the least liked out of all the set. As seen previously, reference and soy have similar microstructure. That's why it generated similar liking scores. Coconut is just made of fat particles without any protein. That's why the liking was pretty low as compared to others. Out of these 3, the structure is quite well interconnected. However, berry was lower liked because of other attributes of composition. Cookies didn't have any fat particles, that's why we cannot see any red stains in this one. And drinkable was in a drinking format. That's why it has a lot of serum particles, which can be seen in black and unstained. Multi-factor analysis was carried out to understand the relationships between sensory and textural attributes. Overall liking was linked to the positive emotion and the textural terms as seen in this one, and also linked to soy, reference, drinkable, and cookies on this side of the axis. Negatively, fat was and cookies and fat, calories, and sugar was negatively related to the emotion terms, and also to coconut and berry yogurt. In conclusion, the plant-based yogurts, especially soy, can be similarly liked as the dairy-based, when they have similar structural properties and the textural properties. Not all the plant-based yogurts can be similarly liked in case of coconuts due to the microstructural differences. And there were no direct correlations between the overall liking and the protein content, which is beneficial in case of the plant yogurts that can have a lower protein content as compared to the dairy. Moving on to the next objective, which is the measuring of the effect of physicochemical properties of yogurt products on emotional and physiological responses of consumers. A bit about the background on this includes biometric measurements, as we all know, can predict liking of yogurt products along with the traditional hedonic scales. And machine learning models can predict consumer liking through near infrared absorbance values and also the physicochemical properties, this has been done in collaboration with another group, SIG and Claudia. So all the models were developed using MATLAB and they hold the IP for these. In the study methods, the same 6 test yogurts were taken, and the sensory tests in this one included measuring the physiological measurements, including the heart rate and facial expression using Affectiva. The physicochemical attributes, including the NIR values, which have been displayed on here, on the side of the chart, and pH, Brix, density, color, and firmness were measured. And physicochemical attributes, as mentioned here, were linked to the sensory attributes, and predictive models were developed using the NIR to estimate overall liking. A Pca plot was carried out in this one between the physicochemical attributes and the sensory attributes. We can see that overall liking was positively linked to heart rate and firmness of products, and also to the cookies and soy yogurt, and also to the positive emojis as seen here, which were the facial expression generated from Affectiva. And the physicochemical attributes like density, Brix, pH were negatively related to the overall liking scores and also related to the berry yogurts. This is how the artificial neural networks were used to create the regression models to predict overall liking scores and the physicochemical attributes using inputs of the infrared absorbance values. 100 NIR values were taken as the inputs to form outputs of physicochemical attributes, which were further taken as inputs for the model to generate overall liking scores as the outputs. This is how the models were created using the MATLAB. And the model 1 predicted the physicochemical parameters, and the model 2 predicted overall liking scores. As conclusion of this research chapter, the regression models were based on artificial neural network, which were consistent with our previous sensory liking studies. The facial expression recognition, which was carried out using Affectiva in this case, and the heart rate, were both correlated with the overall liking as seen in the Pca plots. The NIR, we can see, is a simple and a non-invasive and rapid technique to predict overall liking of yogurt products. Moving on to the third objective, which is understanding the impact of culture on liking and emotions of yogurt products. We have already seen the effect of texture, structure, and the emotions on the liking. Another factor that affects the liking is a culture, which can affect the familiarity and neophobia. And it is very difficult to predict cultural effects using the traditional sensory methods like the hedonic scales. That's why advanced methods of the sensory and the emotions have been used in the study to measure the cultural effects. As a study method, the same 6 test yogurts were taken in this case as well. Cultural comparisons were carried out across Asians and Western category. Facial expression recognition method using face reader was carried out in this case. The check all that apply with emotion terms and check all that apply with emotions was carried out. This is the list of emotions presented here that were used for the carrying out the study. These were also selected using the focus group studies. The emojis, that's a list of emojis, and this is the list of the facial expression recognition, FER method, generated by the face reader. This is how This is the differences of liking among Asian and Western categories, and which is, we can see it's almost similar for all the yogurts, and we did not see any differences. However, the differences were generating using emotions, using these emojis, emotions, and the FER, but I have not mentioned the results over here because they were quite long. As just mentioned, as a table here, which is a linear mixed model with overall liking as the response variable. These are the list of emotions that were related. That's the list of emojis. And that's the list of the FER that showed significance. Out of these, only emojis show the effect of culture and none other could show the cultural effect. That's the similarities between the sensory methods. All the sensory methods were quite consistent. Oral liking was linked to the positive FER terms, emojis, and also the positive emotions, and were also similarly linked to positive liking scores for the other yogurts as seen previously. In conclusion, the Asian and Western cultures showed similar liking, but different emotions across the different yogurt categories. The check all that applied terms, especially emojis, helped in better understanding and explaining of the liking scores and the cultural comparisons. This is because emojis do not have, if we are using different cultures of Asians and Western whose first language is not English, it's very easier for them to pick up the emojis, not the emotion terms, which can be not understood that well. So emojis has shown to be a promising way of understanding the different cultures, especially if you're using someone with non-English speaking background. The facial expression method has not been very well, and it cannot be used as a standalone method. It has to be used in combination if we need to actually quantify the emotions. Moving on to the next objective, that's evaluating the perceptual responses, which is affecting liking and popularity of yogurt products. Until now, we have already seen the sensory and textural properties can be well appreciated if for the plant-based yogurts if these are formulated well. And the next thing that we want to focus on is understanding the perceptions and mindset of the consumers to understand what's the gap between the popularity. A focus group study was carried out using affective responses, which is the emotions, cognitive responses, which is the health and the ingredients, and the social responses, which is the diet and sustainability. And all the terms are mentioned here. These are the shortlisted terms that were selected using the focus group studies. The overall liking survey study showed higher liking for dairy yogurts, whereas a lower liking for the plant-based yogurts. And in case of the actual liking, as seen in the previous results, both showed a similar liking. So we can see only there's a perception in the mindset of the consumers that they think that dairy is higher liked, more preferred as compared to the plants. However, in actual tasting, when they are not told which product is which one, they had similar liking. This is a linear model which was carried out using overall liking scores as a response variable. This one on the left is for the dairy-based yogurts, and one on the right is for the plant-based yogurts. It has a combination of affective, social, and cognitive responses. Only gut health and nasty were common among both the dairy and the plants. And dairy was linked to dependable, neutral, nasty for the affective terms. Phytochemicals, gut health for the cognitive terms, and cultural effect was only shown by the dairy, but not in case of the plants. Whereas plant was related to cheerful, luxury, nasty, and deceitful, and guilt-free for the affective responses, gut health for the cognitive, and animal food for the social. There is no social response associated with the dairy. Conclusions for this one. Plant-based yogurts have shown a lower liking in the perceptual study. However, still there is a huge growth potential for this category. And to make it more popular, we need to familiarize consumers with the novel these products. make them aware of the benefits to their own health and also to the environment, and also to understand the needs for the specific cultural groups to make it more popular. Moving on to the last objective of the study is developing plant-based yogurts with novel microalgae and soy combinations. Based on the previous understanding, as we all know, sustainable approach will be helpful to incorporate if you're formulating a new plant-based novel product. And we also need something which has a good texture, and can have an improved viscosity and network structure. And microalgae is one ingredient which is novel, can impart texturizing ingredients and also form a better network. That's why we have used it in our study. That's a flow chart of how this microalgae yogurt fermentation was carried out. Whole microalgae solutions in soy milk of 2 and 5% was taken. Microalgae species of chlorella and spirulina were used, which were the only commercially available at that time. And these are the food grade ones. A high homogenization, HPH is a high pressure homogenization was used to break down the cell walls to release the proteins. And a very high homogenization pressure had to be used in this case because it's very hard to break down the microalgal cell walls, especially in case of chlorella, which has a cell wall made of cellulose, and it's very, very difficult to break it. That's why we had to use a very high HPH pressure. Changes in homogenization pressure was seen and measured using particle size and confocal laser scanning microscopy. Heat treatment was carried out for 63 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes. And then finally, the fermentation was carried out using the commercial lactic acid bacteria at the pH of until the pH reached 4.5 for 42 degrees Celsius. And changes in texture and structure were measured in the form of gel firmness, viscoelastic properties, rheological changes, and the microstructure. Microstructure of chlorella and spirulina can be seen before and after the homogenization treatment. In case of spirulina, we can see these have the longitudinal cells, and after the homogenization, there's complete disruption, and also can be seen from the particle size analysis, which is this peak is before the homogenization, and after homogenization, the peak height has gone towards the left, shifted towards the left, and lower than 1 micrometer. And for chlorella, we can see whole cells are still present, and there's an incomplete disruption of chlorella, and also can be seen from the particle size analysis. After the fermentation, these are the various types of yogurts that were fermented in the lab. Soy as control was there, and which was not fermented. Commercial grade soy milk was taken to carry out all these analyses. Fermentation, and after homogenization and fermentation, this is what the soy milk yogurt looked like. This is 2% chlorella and soy combination, 5% chlorella soy combination, 2% spirulina soy, and 5% spirulina soy. And all these were compared with the commercial soy yogurts, which of course had added thickeners and stabilizers, that's why the structure is quite smooth and thick, whereas our lab grade yogurts didn't have any thickeners, so that can be seen here. Chlorella formed a very soft gel, and at 2%, and when we increased to 5%, the gel was still soft, but the color was quite intense. In case of 2% spirulina, it formed the best well-set gel, and if we increase the concentration to 5%, the yogurt structure you can see is quite lumpy and quite intense dark green color. This can also be seen from the textural analysis and the synthesis. 2% spirulina soy had the highest uniformness values as compared, which is comparable to the commercial soy. However, this is a bit lower as compared to the 5% spirulina soy, but still this is quite acceptable as it is equivalent to the commercial soy. The mean synthesis values is lowest for 2% spirulina soy, and the commercial soy did not see any synthesis because this had added thickness to it. The microstructure has been shown here. This has been compared to the commercial soy, This is our lab made soy yogurt. 2% spirulina and 2% chlorella has been compared. We can see the green particles are the proteins and the red particles are the fat particles. And this has the most interconnected network of proteins and fats. That's why this is much better as compared to the chlorella, which has not been well set. And there's a lot of gaps in some particles in there. In conclusion, we can see spirulina with the high pressure homogenization showed a high potential to form a vegan yogurt because of all the attributes, including texture, firmness, and the microstructure. Chlorella did not form gels due to the cells not being disintegrated well. And if we increase the concentration to 5%, the gels are weakened and gets lumpy as well, and of course the darker color. As conclusion of the whole research, plant-based yogurts have a considerable growth potential. These have the potential to be formulated into similar texture and overall structure as compared to the dairy and can be appreciated well by the consumers. NIR models, as seen previously, which are based on the ANN for sensory liking estimation, can be used to access sensory testing in a very limited and time-consuming way with large sample sets, and can be used whenever we have large sample sets and we have less time to carry out the sensory analysis. The effect of culture, it's really important to consider the effect of culture when we are formulating a product, because this affects the liking and familiarity. And this can be best displayed by the Kata emojis method as compared to the other ones. The perceptual attributes, that is where the main gap in the popularity of these plant-based yogurts lie, and is because of these consumer mindset and perceptions. Consumers need to be more aware of their benefits as a product development strategy, which can be adopted by the industries. And finally, as a product, as a vegan yogurt, spirulina has shown a great potential to be formulated into vegan yogurts based on the texture, water holding capacity, and the viscosity values, which is quite similar to that of the commercial yogurt, and that too without any additives. The future studies can focus on formulating vegan yogurts on using other microalgae species, and it will be important to carry out how the consumer acceptability works with these, and also to understand how the health and emotions are related with these new formulations, especially the health benefit. These are microalgae are quite healthy, but as a part of the study, didn't have sufficient time to carry out these. Some of the awards and the conferences that I attended. Three of the papers have been published already, and 2 are in the draft and in preparation. And I would like to thank all my supervisors for all their support in this time, especially during the COVID. Thank you so much, Frank, Sally, Jeremy, Damir, and Lydia for all your support and all your guidance. And thank you so much, Kate, for being there as a chair. I would also like to thank other faculty, especially Professor Jill, who has helped me in understanding the perceptual study part, Sigfredo and Claudia for their NIR models, and Craig Martin for helping me with the high pressure homogenization, because it was quite hard to carry that out and break the cell walls of these microalgae, and Kram with all the statistics part, which has been quite intense for all the sensory studies, and he has been of great help. And I would also like to thank the Future Food Hallmark Research Project initiatives. Thank you, Min, and thank you, Robin, for being there and helping me with the project and all the publications. And I would also like to thank all my colleagues and fellow students, Melanie, Bighanis, Rosita, Singh, Vicky, Lee, Michelle, Kieran, and Sheila, and Hugh, Richard, and Akhtar for being there with all the lab tests and for their assistance. And especially our lab officers, Nick, Valentina, without whose help, I don't think so, this would have been successful. I would also like to thank my husband, Jatin Gupta, my parents, and my family for all the support in these 4 years' time, and also University of Melbourne for the research stewardship and funding this project. preferences. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.